양제 전부 소도 님미장 손을 모는 전부가 되다 바카르 다른 찬도 절만도 돈바티 제잔라게 샴사로 내저 로르스니 장kon선저 투지션로 일라 지금의 번소저랑 소란데 공제 도반 포를 신지로
The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of aeons. I now see it here to receive and uphold it, about to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings, thus generate the supreme bodhicitta. Now let us continue with the Surangama Sutra. Within the Surangama Sutra, we have already covered on the part where the Buddha taught one should let go of the Shravakayana's aspiration, but practice and uphold the Mahayana bodhicitta. If one were to do so, then there are two resolves. The first one is that we need to engage in the practice of shamatha, and in order to recognize the nature of mind, we need to practice vipassana. And then the Buddha gives the example of water, which demonstrates that our minds needs to be settled down first. This is crucial. We know that it's crucial conceptually, but because we are mundane beings, sometimes though that we conceptually know it, but we cannot let go of the chores that we need to deal with in life, which then lead to the lack of practice, even till the time of death. There is such a possibility. Anyhow, it is still better to know than not knowing. Throughout our practice, there are various kinds of activities. We need to practice all kinds of rituals, such as prostration, circumambulation, the nomdro, which would gather great merits. But eventually, we do need to get into meditation, and through meditation, you need to clarify your conceptual mind. After the conceptual mind would settle, your nature, the nature of your mind would be able to be revealed. At that time, you can recognize the nature of your mind, and then that's the time when all the afflictions would no longer fetter you. This is quite important, and that's the first resolve we talked about. The teaching that we studied yesterday is very similar to the Mahayati teaching on the part of seeing the nature of mind, except the Vajrayana directly points out the luminous mind. What was that sound? A cell phone sound? How could you still have your cell phone while the others have handed in their cell phones?
这样的之所以这个大圆满的这种这个修行呢
The practice of Mahayati,
这样的一种知识
by
方法
relying this particular method of direct pointing out, would lead you to recognize the nature of your mind, and these two methods are very similar. This time, while we're studying the Surangama Sutra, a great deal of the teachings within this text are very similar to the pith instructions to the Vajrayana teachings, and sometimes we can say that they are exactly the same. Maybe people would say that the Surangama Sutra is a Sutrayana teaching. But over here, in terms of giving the particular pith instructions on recognizing the nature of mind, it is indeed quite supreme. Whenever I prepare to give classes and whenever I am contemplating upon the teachings of Surangama Sutra, I think I didn't really spend too much time on the preparation, and sometimes I really wish that I would have another opportunity to fully and detailedly and more extensively study on the Surangama Sutra. And then I would love to give teaching on this again. But as we all know, this would be very difficult to be put into practice. It would be not realistic because each and everyone's life is so short. Even if we can finish giving this teaching once completely, that is something that we can call successful, and it is something that we should be very happy about already. Many people, after studying the Surangama Sutra, had developed new insights about their practice. On one hand, many probably feels that the recognition of the nature of mind is really not that simple. Some people would say that, oh, I am simply abiding the nature of my mind. I have already attained liberation. There are people who would claim so, but it is indeed quite naive. It is not to say that you won't be able to recognize the nature of your mind. In fact, as long as you practice diligently, you will be able to recognize the nature of your mind. It is just, it's not going to be that easy. The reason that the Surangama Sutra is so popular for a period of time within history, as you know, that during the Tang Dynasty, it was extremely popular, except later on, throughout the various situations within history, the Surangama Sutra then laid in a dormant state. This time, after we finished giving the teaching on the Surangama Sutra, I believe there will be hundreds of people who would be able to give teachings on Surangama Sutra. I know that because after class every day, I would listen in to your group discussions and presentations, and many of you are very good at your debates, at your discussions, at your own contemplations. I can see that your understanding of the Surangama Sutra is really quite good. I encourage you to make good notes of the class and study it well, and don't forget it, because later you will have the opportunity to give teachings on it. Now let's look at the second resolve. The second resolution is this: if you definitely wish to bring forth the resolve for Bodhi and to be especially encouraged and dedicated in your cultivation of the Bodhisattva vehicle, you must decisively renounce all conditioned appearances. So over here it says that at the time of making the aspiration for supreme bodhicitta, to enter into the Mahayana vehicle, the Bodhisattva vehicle, you need to be courageous and you can't be lazy. Within the Larungar over here, within our academy, there are people who would feel that they are happy as long as they can maintain their livelihood. This is not great diligence. When we make the aspiration for the Mahayana vehicle, when we make such aspiration, we need to have the sense of eagerness and a sense of urgency, just as if a beautiful woman's hair is on fire. We need to have that kind of urgency when it applies to liberating sentient beings. We need to carry such kinds of responsibility and understand that it is up to us to liberate the sentient beings. This is the courage that is needed in the Bodhisattva yana. After we have studied the sutras and after listening to the classes, maybe you would feel that your mind started to go through a transformation, which is a sign that the teaching is working on you, is benefiting you, and is blessing you. The blessing is a power that would transform your mind stream, such as the blessings from the deity and the blessings from the teacher that would be able to help you to transform your practice onto the more favorable and a more positive aspect. The blessing is not necessarily that the teacher gives you an apple or something that you desire. It is in fact when your mind would go through a transformation, and sometimes the transformation is quite intense, and that kind of transformation within the Bodhisattva yana would happen. the blessings and the transformation sometimes would transform you very swiftly, and the blessings is quite intense. And in such a way, you have to have a sense of courage, ready to let go and renounce all conditioned appearances. The Tibetan translation of all the conditioned appearances is the appearance of solidity. Sometimes whenever we look at enlightenment, the insights, attainment, or afflictions, many of those are seen as solid appearance, and that is not appropriate. Rather, as a Mahayana practitioner, we need to view everything, view all phenomena as a dream and as illusions. In such a way, though we're seeking for Bodhi, but such kind of pursuit is not a solid pursuit than that of the Shravakayanas. And then, to continue, the Buddha says that you should carefully consider the origin of affliction and the beginningless creation of karma and perpetuation of rebirth, who creates it and who endures it. So we need to look at the nature of the afflictions. We need to pay great scrutiny at the nature of the afflictions. According to the text Tattva Siddhi, it states that out of the 84,000 dharmas, out of the treasure of such, all of the wisdom has the function to eradicate ignorance. So what we need to do is to make observation of the nature of the affliction. What is the nature of affliction then? It is from beginningless time, the creation of karma and the perpetuation of rebirth. From beginningless time, out of the ignorance of not knowing the truth of all phenomena, there comes the habituating with the love, grasping, and consciousness, and so on within the 12 nirdanas, kept on perpetually being produced from ignorance. And then whomsoever creates it would endure it. That is to say, if a person were to create the karma in the 6 times, then those karma would be imprinted in one's alaya, in the 8 consciousness, and then later one would have to endure the fruition, that is the karmic retribution of it. So we know that the root of affliction is the continuancy since the beginningless time that perpetually continued within one's mind stream. This is affliction, and that is the effect of affliction, the result of affliction. And then the Buddha told Ananda, saying that if in your cultivation of Bodhi you do not carefully consider the origin of affliction, you cannot realize the empty falseness of the sense organs and sense objects or the location of delusion. If you don't even know its location, how can you subdue it and reach the level of the thus come one? Now the Buddha is not scolding him anymore, so Ananda is not crying anymore. Now the Buddha is extremely kind to Ananda and has been giving very profound teachings to Ananda, and Ananda must be really happy at this point. Over here the Buddha said that, well, Ananda, if you really want to practice the Bodhi, if you really want to cultivate the Bodhi, if you do not observe the roots of affliction, then you would not be able to know the falseness of the 6 roots and the 6 sense objects. Making observation of affliction is so crucial, without which we would not know everything is simply empty falseness. within conventional truth, everything is no other than the entanglement of subjects and objects, which then produced all kinds of delusions within the animate and inanimate world. Without making further observation of afflictions, we would not know that the 6 roots and the 6 objects are simply falseness. We would not know where and how it is false. If you remember, at the time of studying entering the way of the great vehicle, it states that if you are a practitioner that wants to be parted from the suffering ocean of samsara and attain the Supreme Bodhi, then at first you have to make the observation of affliction. And then there's the explanation of the nature of affliction, the various schools' explanation of the nature of affliction. So in terms of affliction, we have to understand that it is just as a dream and as an illusion. Though that through different schools and teachings there are different points of view, but at the very beginning of entering the way of the great vehicle stated that if you really want to attain liberation from samsara and really want to attain the fruition of Buddhahood, you have to recognize the roots of affliction. All of you who are listening to this class, I believe you also recognize that the affliction is the key to understand. At the beginning of studying Surangama Sutra, I remember that there were about 70,000 people who were studying the Surangama Sutra altogether back in 2019. But now, out of various causes and conditions, we have only a few people left. If we do not seek for the root of affliction, if just the few of us listening to the Surangama Sutra do not seek for the root of affliction, that would be such a pity. Because whenever we are looking for the root of affliction, the Mara Papian and his retinues would definitely be very upset. They would use various ways to stop us from doing so, because if we were to find the root of affliction, we would be harmful to them, to the Maras. So whichever way we use and however the conditions are, we definitely have to find the root of affliction. Otherwise, there is no way for you to attain Buddhahood, nor to liberate sentient beings. The kinds of sentient beings with great amount of suffering and afflictions, how could you liberate sentient beings? And how could you even help yourself to part ways from the 3 existence and from the samsara? You would be only wandering in samsara just because of the root of affliction is still there. It is just to say, finding the roots of affliction is just like finding the enemy that we need to subdue. If you do not know where your enemy stays and the nature of your enemy and the function of your enemy, if you do not recognize it, how could you subdue the enemy? Similarly, whenever you want to subdue afflictions, you have to recognize it. What is the affliction, such as aggression? Then what is it? Where is it? What's the shape of it? What is the most terrifying thing that the aggression would be afraid of? And how can we uproot such kinds of affliction? That is the most important. Unlike for the mundane beings, without knowing the suffering and the harm that could come from the afflictions, they would feel quite proud whenever they have aggression and greed and so on and so forth. If not knowing the harm that could be brought about by afflictions, then how could we subdue afflictions? How could we uproot affliction? And how could we attain the fruition of the thus come one? The Buddha here then gives an example. He says that Ananda, consider the ordinary person who wants to untie a knot. If he can't see even where the knot is, how can he untie it? There is no way to untie it if you can't even see it. if you were to see someone who's tied up and then you are about to untie this person, but if you can't even see a person that's being tied over there, then how could you untie it? And then the Buddha continued to say that, but I have never heard that one can obliterate empty space. Why? It is because emptiness has no form or appearance. Therefore, there are no knots to untie. The affliction is just like space. This is the meaning of this example. We have never heard the destruction of space, untying of space, tearing up of the space, to axe through the space, to burn the space. There is no way to do so. When we study the Uttara Tantra Shastra, it also talks about could you burn the space? Could you tint the space? Could you destroy the space with weapons? Nobody had ever heard such kinds of expression or such thing that the space can be broken by anything, because the space does not have any form. If the space doesn't have any form, then how could the space be tied up? Or to make any kinds of transformations and changes. It is not possible. And then the Buddha continued to say that, but now your visible eyes, ears, nose, and tongue, as well as your body and mind, are like the 6 thieving matchmakers. It's hard to pronounce it. The thieving matchmakers. So here it states that all the body, eyes, ears, nose, and tongue, the 6 roots of your body, is equivalent to 6 thieves. Or 6 thieving matchmakers. The one that matchmakes the thieves to the evil activities. They would then plunder the jewels of your household. Over here, the example, the metaphor is that after having the 6 roots, it is equivalent to have the 6 matchmakers that would matchmake with the external thieves. And the thieves, the outer thieves refers to the thieves from outside of your household, which is the 6 sense objects, the form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and so on. And then the 6 roots, 6 root afflictions are the inner thieves. According to some commentaries, it states that after having the 6 roots, which are the matchmakers that matchmake the inner afflictions to the outer afflictions, or matchmakes the inner thieves to the outer thieves, the 6 objects and 6 afflictions. In such a way, after the inner thieves and outer thieves has been matched together, then they would plunder all the jewels within oneself, within one family. And the jewels refers to the Tathagata, the Buddha nature. As mundane beings, though that we have the wish-fulfilling jewel-like Buddha nature, but because of the thieves, that is the 6 roots, and the 6 objects, that's the afflictions, with the entanglement of the two, then the jewel-like Buddha nature would be stolen and result in the poverty of ourselves. Temporarily at this moment, though that we have the inherent jewel, we do not have the rights to use it, because this wish-fulfilling jewel is under control of the thieves. According to Master Yuanying and Master Jiao Guang, they stated that the metaphor of 6 thieves to refer to the 6 objects is not reasonable, because the 6 objects are inanimate. But over here, this is really an example to demonstrate the meaning, but not necessarily referring to animate or inanimate. So, to demonstrate this particular teaching, we do not really need to understand it according to the Sutrayana's point of view, where before the consciousness enters into the 6 roots themselves are indeed inanimate. So over here, this is really just an example. It's not necessarily to point to that the form, sound, taste, all of those objects are animate at all. It is not necessarily should be understood in such a way. Also, yesterday we also talked about the 4 great elements and the 6 objects. At the time of intertwining of the 2 will form illusion, the false illusions. To further explain on that point is to say that the 4 elements do not have consciousness. However, at the time of intertwining with our consciousness, there is the sensation of the earth element being solid and the fire element being warm and the wind element being of movement and then the water element being moist. But the 4 great elements do not have life, or they are not sentient, they are inanimate. But at the time of being entangled with our 6 consciousness, then the falseness would appear. If the 4 great elements were to intertwine with the 6 roots and 6 consciousness, then the falseness, the delusions, the mad mind will start to manifest. So within samsara, so we need to understand how the body and mind consciousness relate to one another within samsara. I think the teaching within the Surangama Sutra is indeed quite excellent, because the 4 great elements are inanimate, and how could the 4 great elements that is inanimate to be intertwined with our consciousness? At the time of truly making the observation, it is not possible, because the inanimate do not have sensations, and then the animate has sensations. So the 2 cannot be mixed together. And without truly scrutinize the 2, then there is the false sensation that the 2 are intertwined together. But they're just a false perception. And then with such kinds of false perception, there are all kinds of wondrous illusions and causes and conditions would manifest. It is just like when we dream. There is no mountains, rivers, and elephants in the dream, nor at the same time when we're dreaming, those things do not manifest outside, because there is no eye root, ear root, there is no such kinds of perceptions at all. But the person who's dreaming would be able to perceive the elephants and the mountains and rivers and so on and so forth. But those are simply delusions, and the delusions can manifest. As long as the causes and conditions are mature, are met, then the delusions can manifest. And then the Buddha said that, and thus, from beginningless time, living beings and the world have been being bound up together so that the material world cannot be transcended. It is because of such a reason, from beginningless time, the sentient beings have been fettered by affliction and being bound in this material world, in this inanimate world, and cannot transcend it. Around this part, Master Xuanhua gave the example of toku. Toku in the Chinese language is living Buddha. And then Master Xuanhua said that, well, if you were to say that you are a living Buddha, I would be quite mad at you and I will beat you up and I will kill you. But the toku got quite upset and then he walked away. And Master Xuanhua said that how could there be such a living Buddha that is afraid of death and afraid of being beaten up? To point out that to have a living Buddha is not appropriate. It is not reasonable. But maybe it is because Master Xuanhua did not understand some of the terminologies that's used in Tibetan Buddhism. Because living Buddha that's translated into Chinese language is not the meaning of a toku. And Master Xuanhua, since he did not quite understand, though he received and had met the 16th Karmapa, and in some of his books he would also talk about the lamas or some tokus, and he would make his comments on those. We can see that Master Xuanhua was definitely someone who's quite straightforward and sometimes forthright in some of his opinions. But I think those are under certain circumstances, and maybe there's some misunderstanding, and sometimes maybe just a verbal criticism of certain wrong situations. Those could be his remarks under specific situations and not necessarily something that should be recorded or should be transcribed in such a way. Anyhow, there are the different manifestations of tokus. As you know, that living Buddha is not the meaning of the word toku. There are some true rebirth of bodhisattvas and Buddhas, and sometimes those, even as the manifestations of Buddhas and bodhisattvas, they would appear to have also fear and various situations. So when we look at the situation, also when we look at the situation where the great masters of the past criticize other teachers or criticize other people, the disciples shouldn't parrot the teacher's reaction, because we don't know what the sacred meaning of the teacher could be. When we hear the debates and arguments or praises or slanderings of the great masters, we shouldn't follow and we shouldn't parrot such kind of behavior or words. On top of that, some teachers at the times of certain situations, they would criticize others. However, those could be only directed to that particular person or that particular situation. For example, maybe I would criticize a certain person over here in class, but the language that I would use in that instant is not necessarily fully reliable. It could be something that would provide a reference point, but not necessarily completely perfect. Therefore, we should not hold on to those kinds of criticisms. And then the Buddha over here continued to tell Ananda, saying that what is meant by the time and space of living beings? Time refers to change and flow. Space refers to location. Over here, the Buddha points out that the sentient beings would not be able to transcend samsara is because of grasping. If we do not talk about Buddhism at first, in the other religions, some of the sages within the other non-Buddhist religions would already be considered as parted from afflictions. However, if their habitual tendencies has not been uprooted, some of the sages, for example, though appears to have already eradicated their greed, has already parted from greed, but at the time of hearing hearing some melodious songs and sounds, their habitual tendency of afflictions would revive again. So before we completely uproot affliction, completely uproot ignorance, then it is not possible to truly transcend samsara. That is the reason that's stated over here. The worldly beings over here, that is connected to the other living beings, the sentient beings over here refers to the five skandhas that is intertwined with time and space. For such a reason, we cannot attain liberation. Now, the later part, we will talk about the 6 roots that's been intertwined with the 10 directions and the 3 times. Sometimes when I contemplate upon the teachings given in the Surangama Sutra, I think it can be considered as a psychology and a biology and all kinds of a worldly knowledge. You can think of it in such a way because over here it talks about the 6 roots of sentient beings that's being intertwined with time and space, and then there are different causes and conditions that would get involved. So from certain perspective, when we use the Buddhist perspective to analyze time and space, it could be quite interesting. And we have such a method to make this observation. Whenever we face any scholars, the scholars with or without religion and belief, we can very boldly expound the teachings on the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body, and how it is entangled, and how we can make the observation. And they would definitely be persuaded. They would definitely have to agree with the teaching. Initially, I wanted to speak some English, but I got a little bit stage fright, so I'll let it go. Some Western scholars would spend their whole life to study in their profession, in their field. They would study again and again, delve into the depth of it. Compared to all of us, I think we only would use a few days of time to study something, or a few years. We would get very careful, but later on, we would no longer be enthusiastic in those subjects or fields. When it comes to the study, the path of study, it's crucial for us to develop that kind of attitude to delve into the depth of certain subjects and to engage in the practice with great courage and longing, as well as eagerness, so that later we can attain success. This is quite crucial. The Buddha over here points out that time refers to change and flow, space refers to location. This particular explanation is rather very different than how we would describe the world. This is a very unique perspective. So the time refers to time and flow. And space refers to location, but together in the Chinese translation, it is rendered as the world. The term of time and space is rendered in the compounded meaning of the world. The Buddha then continued to say that you should know by now that northeast, southwest, and northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest, above and below are space. Altogether, there are the 10 directions. Past, present, and future are periods of time. These are called the 3 times. There are 10 directions in space and 3 periods of time. Altogether, it is called the world. The 10 directions and 3 times. Sometimes it is called the world, sometimes it is called the 10 directions. When we read the Surangama Sutra, it says that the sentient beings of the 10 directions and the 3 times, they are often the description of the 10 directions. All living beings come into being because of false interaction. Their bodies go through changes and they're caught up in time and space. The 10 directions and the 3 times, using our modern language, it is called time and space. According to Albert Einstein, the time and space is simply the illusion of the human beings. And from the perspective of Buddhism, if we were to further make the observation based on the partless particles and partless units of time, then the time and location are also empty. They're not truly existent. It is simply something that we would use in our conventional life. All the sentient beings of the 6 realms, in fact, all have the penetrating Buddha nature. It is pure and pervasive. However, because of the 4 great elements and the karma of the sentient beings at the time of the intertwining of the 4 great elements and the karma of the sentient beings, then there forms the illusion. So the 4 great elements would become obscurations, and by holding onto the illusions, the sentient beings would continuously to wander in samsara. And the body would continuously manifest because of causes and conditions. According to the Tibetan translation, over here where it talks about the caught up in time and space, is translated as infinite time. Because the sentient beings' dualistic thoughts would intertwine with the external causes and conditions, and then the body and mind consciousness of the sentient beings would continuously to manifest in this world until infinity, until the end of samsara. So the sentient beings would continuously to intertwine with the 10 directions and 3 times for the complex causes and conditions. At the time of intertwining, then the sentient beings will continuously to wander in samsara, will continuously to exist. According to a commentary, it says that the mind itself does not have time nor location. Our thought at this very moment is not existent. But the sentient beings, because of the existence of the dualistic thought, after such dualistic contemplation, then there is the manifestation of root, and after root, then the 10 directions, and then the 3 times. And then the continuous changes and manifestations, including the world that is full of all kinds of phenomena. If we were to truly understand the nature of all phenomena. There is no time, there's no space, there is no sentient beings, there is no dust or atoms, there is nothing in the nature of our mind. It is just like the clouds appears in the space. Though that the clouds would manifest in the space, but it is not existent at all. But the space that is the same as our mind is all pervasive. But since the space would intertwine with mind consciousness, which would result in illusion, then various kinds of phenomena would also appear on top of being intertwined with world and with time and location. The Buddha continued to say that, however, although there are 10 directions in space, those known in the world as north, south, east, and west are the only ones that can be clearly fixed. The sentient beings that perceives the 4 directions, the mundane beings usually would be very clear of these 4 directions of the north, east, west, and south, and those directions would not change. However, above and below have no position. The intermediates have no definite direction. That is to say, if you were to walk to the west, then your previous location would be more of the east. However, the general direction of the 4 great directions would not have great change. But the above and below doesn't really have a fixed location. If you do not have up and below, then how could you have a fixed location of middle? So the above and below are rather just illusions. It is different than the 4 directions. Later we will look further into it. Since the 4 directions are rather quite clearly fixed, and then over here it says that determined clearly to be 4 in number, they are then combined with the 3 periods of time. 3 times 4, or alternately 4 times 3, make 12. These kinds of multiplication over here, according to different commentaries and according to different great masters of the past, are the explanations are a bit different, but after calculation, I think the numbers are similar. I personally feel that the explanation given in Holding the Palm commentary is rather a bit easier to understand. So over here we will calculate it according to that commentary. How is it calculated? It is stated that the 10 directions and 3 times can manifest into many different phenomena and many different numbers. Just like when we make the visualization of the Buddhas of 3 times. And then we can visualize 10,000, 1,000, 100,000, and so on and so forth. Just like the cloud offering of Samanabhadra, it would be infinite. So over here it says that the time and space roughly can be calculated as 12. And then 112 and then 1200. It is related to the 6 roots of sentient beings. Then it is the 7200. How is it calculated then? It is that the 3 times the 4 directions, that is 12, and the 3 times before the 4 directions, that is also 12. The 4 are 4 directions, and 3 is the 3 times, so 3 times 4, 4 times 3, whatever it is 12. The result is 12. We've memorized it in elementary school, so it's not that difficult. In China, we would memorize this multiplication table in elementary school, but I think it is not a popular way of doing multiplication abroad. Over here, the 12 is a sign of intertwining of time and space. The 3 times the 4 directions, then that is the 12 according to the time. If it is the 4 directions times the 3 times, then that is the 12 that is associated to the directions. Increase it 3 times, itself multiplied by 10 and again by 10 to reach the thousands. So over here it says 12 times 10. Why 10? If the 12 were to be the 12 from the directions, and then there are the 10 more times that you can multiply it. How do you get the 10 times then? It is the future of future, future of past, future of present. And then the present, there is a present of the present, and present of future, present of past, and past also has such 3 times. And then there is the time there is the direction as well. So the directions can further be divided into the 4 directions, and then on top of the 4 big directions and the 4 sub-directions, and then the top and below, then there are the 10 directions. So the 120 times the 10 directions, that is the 1200 in total. Now, to summarize, the 12 times multiplied by 10 directions, which is 120, and then multiply 10, that is the time, then that is 1200. This is clear, right? So after such rough calculation, there are 1200 times or 1200 kinds of directions, and then that is the result that we can get after multiplying the 10 directions in 3 times. There are different calculations, but I think this calculation would be more easy to understand and more reasonable, because it includes the 4 directions, the major directions. That can be multiplied by the 3 times, so 12. To further illustrate that to you, that is to say that the East has the past East, the present East, the future East. And then to further look at the East of the past, then you can then multiply it by 10 with the directions to further divide the east, south, west, and north directions. In this way, you will be able to get great numbers of directions or times. And then the Buddha continued to say that 1,200 is the greatest possible efficacy of the 6 organs. Now, out of the 6 roots, there could be the 1,200 possibilities as well, because the roots can be multiplied to the directions. For example, the eye sense organ can be multiplied to the 3 times, and then eventually it will come to the 1,200 number as well. And all of these 6 roots are all pervasive too. After studying this, what do we know? What have we learned from it? It is that within this world, the physical body of the sentient beings and how it relates to time and location are quite complex. Including our consciousness is quite complex. It is intertwined in such a complex way. After making such a calculation, we come to this conclusion, which is quite interesting, because our eye faculty can be calculated with 1200 time and location, and then same applies to our eye consciousness. That is to say, if your faculty of the eye has the directions with such grand numbers of possibilities, so it also applies to the eye consciousness as well. When I read into those different commentaries, some of them could be quite confusing and some are quite interesting to understand. I definitely think that this world, if we can perceive this world in such a way, it is quite interesting, because when we look at us, ourselves, we seem to have this one body, but our 6 roots, 6 consciousness, 6 objects can be calculated by the possibilities by the space and time, and it can be further divided into infinite numbers. But none of them are truly solidly existent. This is quite interesting, isn't it? So maybe we should stop here today. And right now, I would like to give you an oral transmission. It is an oral transmission of Simhavaktra Dakini, which is a wrathful manifestation of Avalokiteshvara. Usually this is included, it is included in Lirablambha's Terma collection, and every noon we would chant that. It is included in that chanting. In the first few years when I first came here, I would chant it every day, but I have the responsibility to give you the oral transmission, so I'm giving it to you right now. Ponzo Rinpoche once stated that Simhavaktra Dakini is a great deity to practice protection and revert curses and revert the obscurations. She is a great deity to protect the practitioners, especially when others were to create difficulties and obstacles to you, or curse you, and so on and so forth. I have a photo to show you. This is a photo of Tanka that's been sold for, I think, 300 million Hong Kong dollars, and this is the statue that I'm showing you right now. The deity is a wrathful deity. Many probably feel that the deities, according to Tibetan Buddhism, may seem to be quite strange and have a variety of appearances. But we know that out of all the non-humans, there are different manifestations of the deities. For example, this one is a lion-faced Dakini, and then there's the vulture-faced Dakini, and then the tiger-faced Dakini. The 58 wrathful deities would appear at the time of death. So if we were to chant these mantras and familiarize ourselves with these deities right now at the time of death, we would be happy to meet them.
Churnam Druder Devjin, Rola Debi, Yermic Bahom Marbo, Panivaro Danla, Yongir Kaji Transos, Ranim Kandros, Dunderma, Marmo, Sanke, Donwa, Janajarti Janito, Trojang Tam, Jansam Jardan Cheva, Shui, Churku, Yun Tota. Tapji Ranjin Kajang Ten, Gora Zerna Kyankam Gi, Alan Go Jean Par Ta Shem Sur, Toder Kamar Nga Ye Wala Yana Torlun Ngapji Toshir Chang, Tartan Renchen Ripa Chi, Mepon Marno, Barbi Hlon, Nala Ranjin Mepro, Sam Taker Ranji Yishis and Yami. Tsonggang sarwa yi nyangwi nyemi kirkurda vam ngam raki mdo yung kur tsirki nibra mu vam sanga dagana honza vam sanga dagana honza vam sanga dagana honza vam sanga dagana honza 这中间还有一个它的赞颂文，然后绘制和那个速护都是就是阿嘎萨玛拉的夏萨拉梅帕的阿嘎萨玛拉的夏萨拉梅帕的这个注意啊，就是阿嘎萨玛拉的夏萨拉梅帕的，就是刚才那个万萨达格纳红扎 万三二大根的红杂，就是这个是四面父母的信主，然后下面的是这个绘制和保护的这个信主啊，就这个以后可能大家多念一下，就是这样的话还是很重要的。我看这个后来有一个꿈 족성 집된 바동 간로만 생겨 동안 지지 정강 되는 이발라 때는 도저 오는 고동 집안나 당시에 자 노르시비 거 같아 좀 있는 나 잠시비 조리고 마담 좀 철도 버렸지 초문 바로 쏘는 저 자고 싶나 담치도 링 타라들도 남시 주지 초지르는 변 티역 노시 말이 제와도 접선 유전 저 바동 샤주 담바리 제브름 조도
Now the Samna is currently being translated, and I should be able to make it available before the end of the year. Whenever you have time, I would encourage you to chant the mantra of Simhavaktra Dakini, because she will dispel the obstacles and protect yourself, also revert curses from the others. Maybe there are other, not sure if you have such kinds of situation, but there are people whom would create obstacles to you or curse you and so on and so forth. If you feel such situations apply to you, then you should chant the mantra of Simhavaktra. If you do so, they would definitely be scared away and not going to harm you anymore. Now, in the middle, there's some praises, but the liturgy of supplication, I didn't have time to give you that today, but all of these are included in the chant book already. Currently, it's been translated. We'll stop here today.